So I started looking up entropy. So I started looking into, I'm aware of the word, and I see a house that's been empty for a long time and how it sort of starts to dissolve. And sometimes I think leaving it, your house, to some meth heads might actually be less destructive in the long term to that dwelling than just letting the dwelling rot away, because the tendency towards chaos will always take over. Things will, I don't know, revert maybe, but anyway, towards chaos. So the reason that I called this big effing hole is because, there's this word, right? So it's like this little word, this little hole, just this one word, rabbit hole. Okay, it's technically two words, but you've got this little hole. But what does a rabbit hole lead to? What does the tiny little hole lead to? A giant warren, a big ass multitude of barking dogs, a big ass multitude of, whether it's separate rooms or just a bigger hole at the back. And that's what happened when I started looking up entropy, trying to find a non-knowing all the rules of thermodynamics sort of way of explaining it. And I did come across a section that was explaining entropy to a child. Entropy is a measure of how much the atoms in a substance are free to spread out, move around, and arrange themselves in random ways. So then it brought me to this, which is more disordered, the glass of ice chips or the glass of water? Well, as it turns out, the glass of ice chips, even though it looks disordered, because it's just bits and bobs and bits, it's just floaty bitsy. The ice is in a solid state. It's much more difficult to rearrange those chips of ice, whereas water, the molecules are just floating freely about the place. They can take many different forms. I mean, it's still water, but I mean, whether the molecule's here or the molecule's here, and it'll move all over the place. And then I just went, oh no, this is just too complicated, and I sort of needed to dab my forehead with some ice because it just gave me a brain tweak. Anyway, things are sort of what they are. Sometimes they're complicated, sometimes they're not really complicated. But if you don't put energy into a system, even if that energy is, I don't know if thinking works, although there is some evidence to indicate that observing something changes the outcome of that thing, although it's really difficult to say because if you didn't observe it, you wouldn't know what the outcome was. So I guess it's like Schrodinger's cooling system in this particular instance. And I know I keep getting back to it, but it's irksome. So now I have to ride my e-bike. Now, making a choice to do something is different than being forced to do something. And to be honest, I don't like it. Anyway, that's all I've got to say about that. And this giant hole that I opened up. I mean, other than the giant holes in my cooling system, this just entropy. Anywho, that's all I've got to say about that. If you can't be good at it. And saw ya.